The first time he looked at her after the accident, there was nothing in his eyes. No recognition, no warmth, just the polite, distant courtesy he'd give to any stranger standing in his hospital room. And that was the moment Emma Clark's heart broke for the second time. If you've ever loved someone who forgot you existed, this story is for you. Hit like, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe, because this journey of rediscovering love will stay with you long after it ends. The first time had been 3 months earlier, when the doctors told her he might never wake up. But this was worse, because Lucas Ashford was awake now, his dark eyes clear and focused, his voice steady as he asked the nurse questions about his condition. He was alive. He was here. He just didn't remember her. The accident had stolen 6 years, 6 years of memories erased like chalk from a blackboard. The neurologist said it was retrograde amnesia, severe but potentially temporary. The brain worked in mysterious ways, he explained. Sometimes memories returned in fragments. Sometimes they never came back at all. Lucas remembered his company, his family, his penthouse apartment, and his position on the board of Ashford Industries. He remembered being 28 years old and single, focused entirely on expanding his father's empire. He didn't remember turning 34, didn't remember the charity gala where they'd met, didn't remember the year they'd spent falling in love, or the quiet morning he'd asked her to move in with him, his voice rough with vulnerability she'd never heard before. He didn't remember her. Emma stood in the corner of his private hospital room, her hands twisted together, watching him review documents his assistant had brought. Even now, barely 72 hours after waking from a coma, Lucas was working. Some things, apparently, transcended memory loss. His mother had called Emma that morning. Victoria Ashford's voice had been careful, measured, the same tone she'd used when Emma first entered their world, a tone that said, "You're here on borrowed time." "The doctors think it's best if we don't overwhelm him," Victoria had said. "Too much unfamiliar information could impede his recovery. Perhaps it's best if you give him some space. Let him regain his strength before we explain the situation." The situation. That's what Emma had become. Not Lucas's partner, not the woman he'd chosen against his family's wishes, against every expectation of his world, just a situation to be managed. But Emma had come anyway. She'd stood outside his room for 20 minutes, gathering courage before finally walking in. Lucas had looked up from his tablet. For one breathless second, Emma thought she saw something flicker in his eyes, a shadow of recognition, a ghost of feeling. But then it was gone, replaced by polite confusion. "I'm sorry," he'd said, his voice exactly as she remembered it, deep, controlled, with that slight rasp that appeared when he was tired. "Do we know each other? Do we know each other?" Emma had forced a smile, the kind that hurt. I'm a friend of the family. I just wanted to see how you were recovering." It wasn't entirely a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. And the weight of that half-truth sat heavy in her chest as she watched him now 3 days later, still trying to find the right moment to tell him who she really was, or who she used to be to him. "You've been here a while," Emma startled. Lucas was looking at her now, his tablet set aside. There was no hostility in his expression, just curiosity, the same analytical focus he probably gave to quarterly reports and market projections. "I didn't mean to disturb you," Emma said softly. "You're not." He studied her with an intensity that made her breath catch. It was the same way he used to look at her in the early days, when he was trying to figure out how she'd slipped past all his carefully constructed walls. You've been here every day. The nurses mentioned it. Emma's throat tightened. You're recovering. That's important. And you're avoiding my question. A slight smile touched his lips. Not warm, but not cold either. Just observant. Why do you keep coming here? If we're friends, why don't I remember you? Because you lost 6 years, Emma wanted to say. Because the version of you that's awake right now never met me. Because the man I love is locked somewhere inside your mind, and I don't know how to reach him. Instead, she said, the accident took some memories. The doctors said, I know what the doctors said. Lucas's voice was patient but firm. I'm asking what you're not saying. This was dangerous ground. Victoria had been clear. Don't overwhelm him. Let the memories return naturally if they're going to return at all. Forcing information could cause psychological damage, create false memories, impede genuine recovery. But looking at Lucas now, at the slight furrow between his brows, the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers drummed once against his thigh in a gesture she knew meant he was frustrated, Emma realized something. He knew he was missing something. Not the details, but the shape of it, the absence. We should talk, Emma said quietly, but not here. Not like this. Lucas was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes never leaving her face. Emma felt exposed under that gaze, like he could see through her careful composure to the grief beneath. Tomorrow, he said finally. They're releasing me tomorrow afternoon. My mother is insisting I stay at the estate for a few weeks, but I need to stop by my apartment first. I assume you know where I live? Emma's heart stuttered. She knew exactly where he lived. She'd left her favorite mug in his kitchen cabinet, her books on his nightstand, her toothbrush in his bathroom. She'd left pieces of herself scattered through his life, and now she'd have to watch him discover them like artifacts from a stranger's existence. I know where you live, she said. Then meet me there. 4 o'clock. It wasn't a question. Lucas had never been good at asking when he could simply decide. Whatever we need to talk about, I want to understand. I don't like missing pieces. Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. She left his room with her composure intact, made it all the way to her car in the parking garage before the tears finally came. Hot and silent, they tracked down her cheeks as she gripped the steering wheel. Tomorrow, she would walk into the apartment they'd shared. Tomorrow she would tell him the truth, that she wasn't just a friend of the family, that they'd built a life together, that he'd loved her once. Tomorrow she would have to watch him look at her like a stranger and try to make him fall in love with her all over again. But what if he doesn't? The question whispered through her mind, sharp and terrifying. What if the man who loved you is gone forever? Emma closed her eyes and remembered the last thing Lucas had said to her before the accident, before his car was hit by a drunk driver on a rainy Wednesday night, before 6 years disappeared, before everything changed. They'd been arguing. Something stupid about his mother's comments at dinner, about Emma not belonging in their world. Lucas had been frustrated, tired, his walls up in that way that used to drive her crazy. Sometimes I don't know why you stay, he'd said, the words coming out harsher than he'd meant them. And Emma, hurt and angry, had said something she'd regretted the moment it left her lips. Sometimes I don't know either. He'd left for his meeting. She'd planned to call him to apologize, to remind him that she stayed because she loved him enough to weather his family's judgment, loved him enough to be patient with his walls, loved him enough to choose him every single day. She never made that call. Now sitting in her car with tears drying on her cheeks, Emma made herself a promise. If the universe was giving her a second chance, A terrible, painful, impossible second chance. She wouldn't waste it. She would show Lucas Ashford why she'd stayed. She would make him remember not with his mind but with his heart, even if it broke hers in the process. Tomorrow, she would walk back into the life they'd built together. But this time she would be a stranger in her own home. The apartment looked exactly the same. Emma stood in the doorway at 4 o'clock the next day, her hand still on the handle, taking in the familiar space that suddenly felt like a museum of a life she could no longer claim. The late afternoon light slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting the same golden patterns across the hardwood floor that she'd watched 1,000 times before. Lucas was already there, standing by those windows with his back to her, his silhouette sharp against the city skyline. He'd changed out of the hospital clothes into dark jeans and a simple white shirt, casual for him, though the fabric probably cost more than Emma's monthly rent on the modest apartment she'd been staying in since the accident. He turned when he heard the door close. His expression was composed, unreadable, the mask he wore in boardrooms when negotiating deals worth millions. Emma had learned to see past that mask once. Now she was back to square one, facing a stranger who wore the face of the man she loved. "You have a key," Lucas observed. Not a question, a statement that carried weight. Emma's fingers tightened around the key in her palm. "Yes. My mother said you've been taking care of the apartment, making sure the plants were watered, collecting the mail." He gestured to the living room, where everything was exactly as it should be. Books on the shelves, cushions arranged just so, the faint scent of the candles Emma had lit last week still lingering in the air. "She said you've been very thorough." There was something in his tone Emma couldn't quite read. Suspicion? Curiosity? Or just that analytical distance he used when trying to solve a puzzle? "I wanted to help," Emma said softly, "because we're friends." Lucas moved closer, his hands in his pockets, his dark eyes never leaving her face. "That's what you said at the hospital. Friends of the family." Emma's heart was beating too fast. She could feel the conversation shifting, the ground becoming unstable beneath her feet. Lucas had always been perceptive. It was one of the things that had made him so successful in business, and one of the things that had first drawn her to him. He noticed details other people missed, patterns, inconsistencies, and right now he was noticing that nothing about Emma's presence in his life made sense. "Lucas, there's a coffee mug in the kitchen cabinet," he interrupted, his voice still calm but carrying an edge now. "Blue ceramic, hand-painted. It doesn't match anything else I own. My assistant confirmed I've never ordered anything like it." Emma's breath caught. Her favorite mug, the one she'd bought at a small artisan market 2 years ago during a weekend trip they'd taken upstate. She'd left it in their apartment because she'd been here more often than her own place by then. "There are books on the nightstand," Lucas continued, taking another step closer. "Romance novels, historical fiction, poetry." "I don't read poetry, Emma. I read financial reports and business journals and occasionally a thriller when I need to unwind. But there are 3 volumes of poetry on my nightstand, and they're well worn. Someone's been reading them." He was close enough now that Emma could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, a remnant from a childhood accident he told her about one late night when his walls were down and his voice was soft with sleep. Close enough that she could smell the familiar scent of his cologne, the one she used to breathe in when he held her. Close enough to hurt. "And there's a toothbrush in the bathroom," Lucas said quietly. "A woman's toothbrush. Pink. Next to mine." The silence that followed was heavy, thick with unspoken truth. So I'll ask you again, and this time I'd appreciate honesty." His voice was gentle but firm. "Who are you to me, Emma?" She met his eyes, those dark, intelligent eyes that had looked at her with love once, with desire, with the kind of vulnerable trust he gave to no one else. Now they looked at her with confusion and a hint of something that might have been hurt. "I'm the woman you lived with," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For 2 years, I'm the woman you loved." Lucas didn't move, didn't flinch, but something shifted in his expression, a flicker of shock, quickly controlled. "My mother didn't mention that," he said finally. "Your mother didn't want to overwhelm you. The doctors said a lot of things." Lucas turned away, walking to the windows again, putting distance between them. His shoulders were tense, his posture rigid. "They said my memory might come back. They said forcing information could be harmful. They said I needed time." He paused. "No one said I'd been living with someone, that I'd been in a relationship serious enough that she had a key to my apartment, that she'd left pieces of herself in every room." Emma heard the accusation beneath his words, not directed at her, at least not entirely, at his family, at the doctors, at everyone who had decided what he should and shouldn't know about his own life. "I wanted to tell you," Emma said, "at the hospital. Every day I was there. I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid." "Of what?" Lucas turned back to face her. "That I wouldn't believe you? That you'd look at me exactly the way you're looking at me now," Emma said, her voice breaking slightly, "like I'm a stranger claiming something impossible." The words hung in the air between them. Lucas studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable again. Then he moved to the bookshelf, pulled out a photo album Emma had given him for his 32nd birthday, a collection of their first year together, moments captured in images that told the story his mind could no longer access. He opened it slowly, methodically, his fingers tracing the edges of photographs that should have meant something. Emma watched his face, searching for any sign of recognition, any flicker of memory. There was nothing, just careful observation, like he was studying evidence in a case he couldn't quite solve. "This is us," he said, more to himself than to her. "At a restaurant, at the beach, at what looks like a charity gala." He looked up. "I don't remember any of these moments." "I know. But you do. Every single one." Lucas closed the album carefully, his jaw tight. "Tell me what happened. Between us, I mean, not the accident. I know about the accident. Tell me who I was with you." Emma's throat tightened. How could she possibly compress 2 years of life, of learning each other, of falling in love, of building something real despite every obstacle, into words that would make sense to someone who couldn't remember any of it? "You were different," she said finally. "Not at first. At first you were exactly what I expected. Cold, distant, completely focused on work. We met at a charity gala your company was hosting. I was there with the catering company I worked for." Lucas's eyebrows rose slightly. "You were serving drinks." "I was managing the event, actually, but yes, I started as a server." Emma managed a small smile. "You spilled red wine on your shirt. I helped you clean it up. You were irritated at first. I think you thought I'd done it on purpose to get your attention." "Did you?" "No, you backed into me while arguing on your phone." The memory was vivid, sharp-edged. "You were rude, dismissive. I told you that money didn't give you the right to treat people like they were invisible. You looked at me like no one had ever said anything like that to you before. And that led to this." Lucas gestured vaguely at the apartment, at the life they'd built. "Not immediately. You called the catering company the next day and asked for my number. Said you wanted to apologize properly. I thought you were going to get me fired." Emma's smile widened slightly. "Instead, you invited me to dinner." "I said no. You called again. I said no again. You kept calling." "Persistent," Lucas murmured. "Stubborn," Emma corrected. "You didn't like hearing no, but eventually I said yes. One dinner. That turned into another. Then another. You were—" She paused, searching for the right words. "You were guarded. It took months before you really let me in. But when you did—" "When I did," Lucas prompted, his voice soft now. "You were kind," Emma said simply. "Underneath all the walls, all the expectations, all the pressure to be who your family wanted you to be, you were kind and funny and surprisingly thoughtful. You remembered small things, what kind of tea I liked, which authors I loved, the fact that I hummed when I was concentrating on something." She could see him processing this, trying to reconcile the person she was describing with the man he remembered himself being 6 years ago. A man who, by his own admission, had been entirely focused on business, on proving himself, on building an empire. "And my family?" Lucas asked. "How did they react to this relationship?" Emma's expression shifted. "They thought it would be temporary, a phase. Your mother was polite, but she made it clear she didn't think I belonged in your world." "And did you belong?" The question was soft, but it cut deep, because that was the question Emma had asked herself 1,000 times over the past 2 years. Every time Victoria looked at her with thinly veiled disapproval, every time she attended a business function and felt the weight of judgment from people who saw her as nothing more than the caterer who'd gotten lucky. Every time Lucas's walls went up, and she wondered if she was fighting for something that was never meant to last. "I don't know," Emma admitted, "but you made me feel like I did, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be." Lucas was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant, like he was trying to see something just beyond his reach. Then he looked at her again, and there was something new in his eyes. Not memory, but maybe the beginning of understanding. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For what? For not remembering. For making you explain this. For—" He paused, his jaw working. "For looking at you like you're a stranger when you clearly know me better than I know myself right now." Emma's eyes burned with unshed tears. "It's not your fault." "No, but it's still true." Lucas moved closer again slowly, like he was approaching something fragile. "I want to understand, not just the facts, the pictures, the timeline, the evidence. I want to understand what we were, what I felt." "I can't give that back to you," Emma said, her voice breaking. "I can tell you everything, show you every photograph, replay every conversation, but I can't make you feel what you felt. I can't make you remember loving me." "Then what do we do?" The question was so simple, so honest, that it shattered something in Emma's chest, because that was the question she'd been asking herself every day since Lucas woke up. What do they do? How do you rebuild a relationship when only one person remembers it existed? "I don't know," Emma whispered. Maybe we start over." Lucas tilted his head slightly. "Start over? Get to know each other again, no pressure, no expectations." Emma forced herself to hold his gaze, even though it hurt. "I won't lie to you. I loved who we were together, but that version of us doesn't exist anymore. You're not the same person who asked me to move in, and I'm not the same person who said yes. The accident changed both of us. So we start from the beginning, Lucas said slowly. As strangers. As people who used to know each other, Emma corrected, and who might want to know each other again. The silence that followed was different this time, not heavy with unspoken pain, but open with possibility. Lucas studied her face like he was memorizing it, like he was trying to find something familiar in the features of this woman who claimed to have shared his life. "I have questions," he said finally. "I have answers. A lot of questions. I have time." Emma managed a small, genuine smile. "And so do you. The doctors said you need rest, recovery time before jumping back into work. Use that time. Ask me anything. Let me tell you who we were, and then you can decide who you want to be now." Lucas nodded slowly. Then, unexpectedly, he extended his hand, formal, businesslike, almost absurd in the context of everything they'd just discussed. But there was something tentative in the gesture too, something vulnerable. "Lucas Ashford," he said, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "Apparently I used to be in love with you." Emma looked at his hand, at the man offering it, at this impossible second chance wrapped in tragedy. Then she reached out and took it, feeling the familiar warmth of his palm against hers, the way their fingers had always fit together perfectly. "Emma Clark," she said softly, "and I'm still in love with you." The truth was out. Now came the harder part, making a stranger remember what it felt like to come home. The questions started that same evening. Lucas had asked Emma to stay, suggesting they ordered dinner. "Something you'd choose," he'd said, watching her carefully, like her preferences might unlock something in his mind. She'd ordered Thai food from the place 3 blocks over, the one they used to walk to on Friday nights when neither of them felt like cooking. When the food arrived, Lucas had stared at the green curry for a long moment before asking, "Was this my favorite?" "No," Emma had said softly. "It was mine. You always ordered the pad Thai, extra spicy. You said the curry was too sweet." He'd nodded, filing away the information like data in a spreadsheet. Then he'd tried the curry anyway, his expression thoughtful. "It is too sweet," he'd concluded. But he'd smiled when he said it, a small, tentative thing that made Emma's heart ache. Now 3 days later, they'd fallen into an unusual rhythm. Lucas would call in the morning asking questions that ranged from mundane to devastating. What side of the bed did he sleep on? Did they have routines? What made him laugh? What made him angry? Each question was asked with the same careful neutrality, like he was conducting an interview rather than excavating his own life. Emma answered them all. She told him about Sunday mornings and coffee in bed, about the way he'd hum tunelessly in the shower, about his inexplicable hatred of cilantro and his secret fondness for old black and white films. She told him the small things, the daily things, the things that made up a life together. What she didn't tell him, not yet, was how it felt to watch him sleep, to trace the line of his jaw in the early morning light. She didn't tell him about the first time he'd said he loved her, or the last time they'd made love before the accident. Some truths were too intimate to hand over to a stranger, even if that stranger wore Lucas's face. On the 4th day, he asked her to meet him at a coffee shop downtown. Neutral territory, Emma realized. Not his apartment with its ghostly evidence of their shared life, and not a hospital room heavy with medical authority. Just a coffee shop on a Wednesday afternoon, busy enough for privacy, public enough for comfort. Emma arrived first, choosing a table by the window. She ordered tea, chamomile, the kind that usually calmed her nerves. Today, it didn't help. Her hands shook slightly as she wrapped them around the warm cup. Lucas appeared exactly on time because of course he did. Punctuality was one of those things the accident hadn't touched. He wore a dark grey sweater and jeans, his hair slightly disheveled in a way that made him look younger, less guarded. He spotted her immediately and smiled, a real smile this time, one that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "You're early," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Old habit. You used to say I'd be early to my own funeral." The words came out before Emma could stop them. Too familiar. Too easy. She winced, but Lucas just laughed, a surprised, genuine sound that made something in Emma's chest flutter with dangerous hope. "That sounds like something I'd say," he admitted. He signaled the barista, ordering black coffee without asking for recommendations or modifications. Some things, apparently, transcended memory. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the noise of the coffee shop creating a gentle buffer around them. Emma watched Lucas add exactly 1 sugar to his coffee, stirring it counterclockwise, another small constant in a world that had shifted beneath their feet. "I went to see my mother yesterday," Lucas said finally, his eyes on his coffee cup. "I asked her why she didn't tell me about you, about us." Emma's pulse quickened. What did she say? That she was protecting me, that the doctors had advised against overwhelming me with too much personal information too quickly. He looked up, meeting Emma's gaze, that she thought it might be easier for everyone if the relationship just quietly ended, if we let the amnesia be a clean break. The words shouldn't have hurt, Emma had suspected as much, but hearing them aloud still felt like a blow. Victoria Ashford had never approved of their relationship. The accident must have seemed like a gift, a chance to reset her son's life without the complication of the caterer's daughter who'd somehow infiltrated their world. "I told her that wasn't her decision to make," Lucas continued, his voice firm. "That whatever happened between us, whatever I felt or didn't feel, that was mine to figure out, not hers." Emma's throat tightened. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." Lucas leaned forward slightly, his expression intense. "Emma, I may not remember our relationship, but I know myself. I know I don't let people into my life easily. I know I don't ask women to move in with me on a whim. If I chose you, if I loved you, there was a reason, and I deserve to understand what that reason was. And if you never remember?" The question came out smaller than Emma intended. "If your memory never comes back, and I'm just a stranger telling you stories about a life you can't access." Lucas was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful, measured. "Then I'll decide based on who you are now, who I am now, not who we were." It was a reasonable answer, a fair answer, but it terrified Emma because who she was now was someone shaped by grief and loss, and the impossible weight of loving someone who didn't love her back. She wasn't the same woman Lucas had fallen for 2 years ago, confident, quick to laugh, unafraid of his world because she'd never thought she'd actually become part of it. Now she was afraid all the time, afraid of saying the wrong thing, of pushing too hard, of not pushing hard enough. Afraid that every word she spoke was a test she might fail. "Tell me something," Lucas said, pulling her from her thoughts. "Something you haven't told me yet. Something that mattered." Emma took a breath, considering. There were so many moments she could choose, so many small intimacies and grand gestures, so many pieces of their life together that felt precious and irreplaceable. But what came to mind was something smaller, quieter, something true. "You had nightmares," she said softly. "Not often, but sometimes. You'd wake up gasping, disoriented. You never wanted to talk about them, but I learned that if I just held you, didn't ask questions, didn't push, you'd eventually fall back asleep." Lucas's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across his features. "What were they about?" "You never said, but I think—" Emma hesitated. "I think they were about failing, about not being enough. You carried so much pressure, Lucas. From your family, from the company, from yourself. Sometimes I think the only time you really breathed was when you were with me, because I didn't need you to be anyone other than who you were." The silence that followed was thick with meaning. Lucas stared at her like she'd said something profound, something that resonated with the version of himself he still knew, the man who existed before Emma, the man driven by achievement and expectation. "Do I still have them?" he asked quietly. "The nightmares?" "I don't know. You've been at your mother's estate since leaving the hospital." Lucas nodded slowly, then did something unexpected. He reached across the table and took her hand. Not the formal handshake from a few days ago, but something more deliberate, more curious. His thumb brushed across her knuckles and Emma's breath caught at the familiar gesture. He used to do that when he was thinking, when he was trying to solve a problem. "This feels—" Lucas paused, his brow furrowing slightly. "Not familiar exactly, but not wrong either." Emma didn't dare move, didn't dare hope. "What does it feel like?" "Like muscle memory. Like my hand knows something my mind doesn't." He looked down at their joined hands, his expression contemplative. "The doctors said the brain stores different types of memory in different places. Factual memory, emotional memory, physical memory. They said sometimes the body remembers what the mind forgets." "Do you feel that?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your body remembering?" Lucas met her eyes, and for a moment, just a moment, Emma saw something shift in his gaze. Not recognition exactly, but something deeper, a pull, a curiosity that went beyond intellectual understanding. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I want to find out." He didn't let go of her hand. They sat like that, connected across the small table, while the coffee shop buzzed around them, people laughing, ordering, living their uncomplicated lives. Emma felt suspended between past and future, between the man Lucas had been and the man he was becoming. "I have a proposal," Lucas said finally. "Something my therapist suggested." Emma's heart rate picked up. "What kind of proposal?" "Spend time with me. Not just answering questions or showing me photographs. Actually spend time together. Do things we used to do or new things, it doesn't matter. Let me get to know you the way I apparently did the first time." He paused, his thumb still tracing gentle patterns on her hand. No pressure, no expectations, just time. It was everything Emma wanted and everything she feared. Time with Lucas meant time to fall deeper in love with someone who might never love her back. It meant watching him discover pieces of their life together, while knowing he might choose to walk away from all of it. It meant hope, and hope was the most dangerous thing she could allow herself, but it also meant a chance, a real chance. "Okay," Emma said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. "Time." Lucas smiled, a genuine warm smile that transformed his face, making him look like the man Emma remembered, the one who'd held her in the dark and whispered promises he'd meant with his whole heart. "There's one more thing," he said, his expression growing more serious. "I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Don't try to make me into who I was before. Don't hold back who you are now, because you're trying to recreate something that's gone. His grip on her hand tightened slightly. If we're going to do this, if we're going to see if there's something real here, it has to be honest. I need to know the real you, not the version you think I fell in love with. The request was so insightful, so unexpectedly perceptive, that Emma felt tears prick her eyes. Because he was right. She'd been performing, carefully curating her words and actions, trying to be the woman Lucas had chosen. But that woman didn't exist anymore. Just like the man who'd loved her was locked away somewhere in Lucas's broken memories. "I promise," Emma said, "if you promise me something too." "What's that?" "Don't feel obligated to feel anything you don't feel. If this doesn't work, if you never remember, or if you remember and realize we weren't as good together as I thought we were, tell me. Don't stay out of guilt or pity or some misguided sense of duty." Lucas studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. Then he nodded. "Deal." They shook on it, their hands still clasped across the table, and Emma felt something shift between them. Not love, not yet, maybe not ever again, but something real, something that might, with time and patience and courage, grow into something worth holding on to. They were starting over, but neither of them knew if you could fall in love with the same person twice. The first time they went out together, really out, not just coffee shops and cautious conversations, Lucas chose a bookstore. It was a small independent place in Brooklyn, the kind with creaking wooden floors and the smell of old paper hanging in the air like incense. Emma had mentioned it once days earlier when Lucas asked about her favorite places in the city. She hadn't expected him to remember, much less suggest they go. "You said you used to come here on Saturdays," Lucas said as they walked between towering shelves, his hands in his pockets. Before us." "I did," Emma confirmed, running her fingers along the spines of paperbacks. "I'd spend hours here, get lost in the stacks, find books I didn't know I needed." "Did we come here together?" Emma shook her head. "You were always working on Saturdays. This was my place, my escape." Something flickered across Lucas's face. Regret, maybe, or curiosity about the man he'd been, the one who'd chosen work over quiet Saturday mornings with the woman he loved. He pulled a book from the shelf, examining the cover with careful attention. "What kind of escape did you need?" he asked softly. The question caught Emma off guard, not because it was invasive, but because it was perceptive. Because it suggested Lucas understood that she might have needed escape from something, maybe even from him. "From the weight of your world," Emma admitted. "From feeling like I had to prove I belonged somewhere I wasn't sure I fit. From the pressure of being the right kind of partner for someone whose life was so different from mine." Lucas was quiet, his fingers still on the book's spine. "That sounds exhausting." "Sometimes it was." "Then why did you stay?" It was the same question he'd asked her before the accident, the night they'd argued. The night that had ended with him driving away angry, with Emma's bitter words hanging in the air between them. She'd never gotten to answer him properly then. Maybe this was her chance. "Because the exhaustion was worth it," Emma said, turning to face him fully. "Because when it was just us, no family expectations, no business pressures, no judgment from people who thought I wasn't good enough. It was easy. You were easy. And those moments made everything else bearable." Lucas studied her with that intense focus he brought to everything, like he was trying to decode her words, find the truth beneath them. Were there enough of those moments? "I thought so. But maybe..." Emma hesitated, then pushed forward. remembering her promise to be honest. Maybe I was holding on to what we had in private so tightly that I ignored how hard everything else was. Maybe I convinced myself that love was supposed to be difficult. Is it? Lucas asked. Supposed to be difficult? I don't know anymore. Emma managed a sad smile. I used to think the hard parts proved it mattered. That if we could survive your mother's disapproval and the class differences and all the ways we didn't fit into each other's worlds, then what we had must be real. But now you're wondering if it was just difficult, Lucas finished quietly. Now I'm wondering if I made you as tired as you made me, Emma said. If maybe we were both holding on to something that took more than it gave. The honesty hung between them, raw and uncomfortable. This wasn't the romantic story Emma had been telling, the tale of true love conquering all obstacles. This was messier, more complicated, more true. Lucas set the book back on the shelf carefully, his jaw working. My therapist asked me something yesterday. She asked if I was trying to remember our relationship because I genuinely wanted to, or because I felt obligated to want to. Emma's chest tightened. What did you tell her? I didn't know. He turned to face her fully, his expression open in a way the old Lucas rarely allowed. But being here with you, hearing you talk about the hard parts instead of just the good parts, I think I'm starting to understand something. What's that? I'm not trying to remember loving you, Lucas said slowly, like he was discovering the truth as he spoke it. I'm trying to decide if I want to love you, the you that exists now, the person standing in front of me who's brave enough to tell me it wasn't all perfect. Emma felt something crack open in her chest, not quite hope, not quite grief, but something in between, because he was right. She'd been so focused on making him remember what they'd had that she'd forgotten they were different people now. The accident had changed him, yes, but it had changed her too. Loss had reshaped her. Fear had made her smaller in some ways, braver in others. What if you decide you don't? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What if you get to know me, really know me, not the version from photographs and stories, and you realize you don't want this? Lucas stepped closer, close enough that Emma could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the faint scar above his eyebrow, all the small details that made him real rather than just a memory she was desperately clinging to. Then at least we'll both know the truth, he said, and you can stop carrying the weight of a relationship that maybe needed to end anyway. The words should have hurt, but they didn't. They felt like permission. Permission to grieve, permission to let go, permission to stop pretending that love alone was enough to bridge the gap between who they'd been and who they were becoming. I'm scared, Emma admitted. Of what? Of finding out you're right. That maybe we weren't as good together as I've been telling myself. That maybe the accident gave us both an out from something that was slowly breaking us. Lucas reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so tender, so careful, that Emma's eyes burned with unshed tears. Or maybe, he said softly, we get to find out if we're better now, if we've learned enough from who we were to build something stronger. You sound hopeful, Emma said, trying to smile through the emotion clogging her throat. I am hopeful. Lucas's hand lingered near her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. Because the woman I'm getting to know, the one who's honest about the hard parts, who doesn't pretend everything was perfect, who's scared but shows up anyway, she's someone I want to know better. Even though I'm not who you remember. Especially because you're not who I remember. Lucas smiled, and it was genuine, warm, entirely present. "I don't want to fall in love with a ghost, Emma. I want to fall in love with you. The real you, if that's something we both want." Emma closed her eyes, letting his words sink in. All this time she'd been trying to resurrect what they'd had, to make Lucas remember the love they'd shared. But maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe the point was to discover if they could create something new, something built on honesty instead of nostalgia, on choice instead of obligation. "I want that," she whispered. "I'm terrified, but I want that." "Good," Lucas said. "Because I asked you here for another reason." Emma opened her eyes, finding him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What reason?" "I want you to pick out a book for me, something you love, something that matters to you, and I'll read it." He paused, his voice dropping lower. "I want to understand the things that shaped you, not the version of you I used to know, but the version standing in front of me now." It was such a simple request, but it felt profound. An invitation to share herself, not her memories, not her history with him, but her actual self. The books she loved, the stories that moved her, the words that had carried her through the hardest months of her life. Emma moved through the stacks with purpose now, her fingers trailing across familiar spines until she found it. A worn copy of a novel about transformation and choice, about people learning to see each other clearly instead of through the lens of expectation. "This one," she said, handing it to him. "It's about two people who think they know each other, but they're really just seeing what they want to see. And then something happens that forces them to look closer, to see the truth instead of the fantasy." Lucas took the book, studying the cover. "Sounds familiar, doesn't it?" Emma's smile was sad but real. "I read it 3 times while you were in the coma. It helped me understand that maybe what I was grieving wasn't just you, but the version of us I'd built in my head, the fantasy of what we could be if everything was easier. And now I'm ready to see what's real." Emma met his eyes. "Even if real is harder, even if real means starting over, even if real means discovering we're better apart than together." Lucas nodded slowly, then did something unexpected. He took her hand, not the curious exploration from the coffee shop, but something more confident, more deliberate. "Let's find out together." They left the bookstore hand in hand, stepping into the late afternoon sun. Emma didn't know what would happen next, didn't know if Lucas would ever remember loving her, or if they'd build something entirely new, or if they'd discover that some things were better left in the past. But for the first time since the accident, she felt like they were moving forward instead of backward. She'd spent months trying to make him remember the past. Now they were both learning to imagine a future. 3 weeks passed like pages turning in a book, slowly at first, then faster as the story found its rhythm. Lucas read the novel Emma had given him. He called her when he finished, his voice thoughtful over the phone. "You were right," he'd said, "about seeing what we want to see instead of what's real. I think I've been doing that with my own life, trying to fit back into the person I was 6 years ago instead of accepting that maybe I've changed." They started meeting twice a week, sometimes planned. Dinner at a restaurant neither of them had been to before, a walk through Central Park, a museum exhibit Lucas had never shown interest in, but Emma loved. Sometimes spontaneous, Lucas calling on a Wednesday afternoon asking if she wanted to grab lunch, Emma texting him a photo of something that made her think of him. They weren't dating exactly, but they weren't just friends either. They existed in some undefined space between past and future, getting to know each other without the weight of who they'd been. Emma learned new things about Lucas. He'd started painting during his recovery, abstract pieces that surprised her with their emotional honesty. "The accident gave me permission," he'd said, showing her a canvas of blues and greys, "to be something other than what everyone expects." Lucas learned new things about Emma too. She'd been taking night classes in business management. "I wanted to understand your world better," she admitted, "but also I wanted to prove I belonged there." "Did I know?" Lucas asked. "Before?" "No. I was going to tell you after I finished. I wanted it to be a surprise." Emma's smile was bittersweet. Guess the universe had other plans. They talked about the hard things too. Emma told him about the night of the accident, about their argument, about the words she regretted and the apology she never got to make. Lucas listened without judgment, his hand finding hers across the table. "I wish I could tell you it's okay," he said quietly. "That I forgive you, or that it doesn't matter. But I can't remember it, Emma. I can't remember being angry or hurt or whatever I felt that night. I know. But I can see how much it's hurt you to carry it." Lucas squeezed her hand. "So maybe that's enough. Maybe you can forgive yourself, even if I can't remember needing to forgive you." It was during their 7th week of this careful dance that things shifted. They were at Lucas's apartment. Their apartment. Emma still had to remind herself to stop thinking of it that way, going through boxes of his things that had been in storage. His mother had sent them over, items from his younger years that she thought might trigger memories. Lucas pulled out a worn leather journal, his brow furrowing. "I don't remember keeping a journal." "You started it about a year after we met," Emma said softly. "You said writing helped you process things, made you feel less in your head." Lucas opened it carefully, his eyes scanning pages filled with his own handwriting, familiar but foreign, words from a version of himself he couldn't access. He read silently for several minutes while Emma pretended to look through old photographs, giving him privacy. "Emma?" His voice was strange, tight. She looked up. Lucas was staring at a page, his expression unreadable. "What is it?" "Listen to this." He started reading, his voice rough. "She doesn't fit into my world. Everyone can see it. My mother, my colleagues, the people at the galas who look at her like she's a fascinating anomaly. And they're right. She doesn't fit. But maybe that's what I love most about her. She reminds me there's a world outside of this one, a world where success isn't measured in profit margins and people aren't commodities to be leveraged. She makes me want to be part of that world too." Emma's breath caught. She'd never known Lucas had written that, had never seen inside his private thoughts about their relationship. Lucas kept reading. "I'm afraid I'm going to lose her, not because she'll leave, though maybe she should, but because I'll slowly crush what makes her special by dragging her into my life. I see it happening already. She started dressing differently, talking differently, trying to be what my mother wants instead of who she is. And I don't know how to tell her that the woman I fell in love with was the one who told me money didn't give me the right to treat people like they were invisible. That woman would never try to fit into a world that doesn't deserve her." Silence filled the apartment. Emma felt tears sliding down her cheeks before she realized she was crying. "There's more," Lucas said quietly. "Pages of it. Doubts and fears and love all mixed together. Emma, I was terrified of hurting you, of not being enough, of choosing between you and the life I'd always known. You never told me that," Emma whispered. "No. I kept it inside, apparently. wrote it down instead of talking to you about it. Lucas set the journal down carefully. We were both hiding, weren't we? You were pretending to fit in. I was pretending I wasn't afraid of what loving you meant. Emma wiped her eyes, nodding. We were a mess. Yeah. Lucas smiled sadly. But we were a mess together. He moved closer, kneeling in front of where Emma sat on the floor, surrounded by boxes and memories. His hands cupped her face gently, his thumbs brushing away tears. I need to tell you something, he said, his dark eyes intense and honest. And I need you to really hear it. Emma's heart hammered. Okay. I don't remember falling in love with you. I don't remember our first kiss or the first time I said I love you, or any of the moments that made us us. He paused, his voice dropping lower. But Emma, I'm falling for you now. Not the memory of you, not the version from photographs or journals. You, the woman who's brave enough to tell me when things were hard, who's honest about her fears, who shows up even when it hurts. Lucas, let me finish. His hands were steady on her face, grounding her. I don't know if what I'm feeling is new, or if it's somehow connected to what I felt before. I don't know if my heart remembers you even though my mind doesn't. But I know this is real. What I feel right now in this moment, it's real. Emma closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her. This was what she'd wanted, wasn't it? For Lucas to love her again. But hearing it now, she realized it felt different than she'd imagined. Not like reclaiming something lost, but like discovering something new. I'm falling for you too, she whispered. The you that you are now. The one who paints and reads novels and asks hard questions. The one who's willing to start over instead of trying to force memories that might never come back. Lucas leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers. This is terrifying. I know. What if we mess it up again? Then we mess it up. Emma opened her eyes, finding his so close she could see every fleck of gold, every shadow of emotion. But at least this time, we'll do it honestly. Can I kiss you? Lucas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Not because we used to, but because I want to. Because I need to know what it feels like now. Emma's answer was to close the distance between them. The kiss was soft, tentative, nothing like the passionate reunion she'd imagined during the long months of his recovery. It was careful and curious, a question being asked and answered simultaneously. Lucas's hands slid from her face to her hair, and Emma felt him smile against her lips. When they pulled apart, he was looking at her with wonder. That felt like a first kiss. It was, Emma said, smiling through happy tears. Our first kiss as these versions of ourselves. They couldn't reclaim the past, but maybe they could create something better. The kiss changed everything and nothing at all. They didn't rush into anything. No declarations of forever, no moving back in together, no grand gestures that would have felt hollow without the foundation to support them. Instead, they built slowly, carefully like architects designing something meant to last. Lucas invited Emma to family dinner at the Ashford estate. Victoria's face when they arrived together was a masterclass in controlled displeasure, polite smile, cold eyes, the slight tightening around her mouth that Emma had learned to read as disapproval. "Lucas," Victoria said warmly, embracing her son. Then, turning to Emma with considerably less warmth, "Emma, what a surprise." "Mother, we talked about this," Lucas said, his hand finding Emma's and holding it firmly. "Emma is part of my life. That hasn't changed, even if my memory has." Victoria's smile didn't waver, but something sharp flickered in her eyes. Of course, darling. You're an adult. You make your own choices. The unspoken, however misguided, hung in the air like expensive perfume. Dinner was exactly as uncomfortable as Emma remembered. Lucas's father was polite but distant, asking questions about the company while barely acknowledging Emma's presence. Victoria made pointed comments about the women Lucas had dated before, accomplished women, she emphasized, from good families with proper breeding. But something was different this time. Lucas didn't shrink from the tension or try to smooth it over. When Victoria mentioned Catherine Ashford Wells, a business associate's daughter who'd been asking about Lucas, he simply said, "I'm not interested in Catherine. I'm with Emma." "Are you?" Victoria's tone was light, but her meaning was clear. "Or are you simply trying to recapture something that perhaps ran its natural course?" Emma felt Lucas's hand tighten on hers under the table. She started to speak, to defend herself, but Lucas got there first. "I'm choosing Emma," he said quietly but firmly. "Not because of what we had before, but because of who she is now, who I am with her now. And Mother, I need you to respect that choice." The silence that followed was arctic. Victoria's carefully maintained composure cracked just slightly, a flash of genuine surprise that her son would contradict her so directly. "I see," she said finally. "Well, if you're certain." "I am." Later, in the car driving back to the city, Emma was quiet. Lucas glanced at her, concerned. "Are you okay?" "You stood up to her," Emma said softly. "You never did that before, at least not that directly." Lucas was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the road. "Maybe I should have. Maybe if I had, things would have been different, easier for you. Or maybe," Emma said, "you weren't ready then. Maybe losing your memory gave you permission to be who you actually wanted to be, without the weight of expectation telling you who you should be." "That's a generous interpretation. It's an honest one." Emma reached over, placing her hand on his knee. "I don't need you to be perfect, Lucas. I just need you to be real." He covered her hand with his, that small gesture that had become familiar again. "I can do real." The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that felt both new and ancient. Lucas would paint in the mornings, the apartment filling with the smell of turpentine and creation. Emma would study, spreading her business textbooks across the dining table, occasionally asking Lucas questions about market strategies and corporate structures. "You're good at this," he said one afternoon, reading over an analysis she'd written. "Really good. Have you thought about what you want to do with it?" Emma shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I don't know. Maybe consulting. Maybe something in the non-profit sector, helping small businesses grow. I just wanted to prove I could do it." "To who? Me? My mother?" "To myself," Emma admitted. "I spent so long feeling like I didn't deserve to be in your world, like I was pretending to be something I wasn't. I wanted to actually become that something, to earn my place instead of just occupying it." Lucas set down her paper, turning to face her fully. "Emma, you never had to earn anything. You belonged because I chose you, because we chose each other." "Did we, though?" The question came out before Emma could stop it. "Or did you choose me and I just adapted, became what you needed me to be?" It was the fear she'd been carrying, the one she'd been too afraid to voice, that their entire relationship had been built on her transforming herself to fit into his life rather than them creating a life together. Lucas was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know," he said finally, and the honesty of it hurt more than any platitude could have. I can't remember how it was, but I know how it is now. And now I see you studying because you want to, not because you're trying to impress anyone. I see you telling my mother exactly what you think instead of staying quiet. I see you being yourself, Emma. And that's who I'm falling for. But what if being myself isn't compatible with being with you? Emma's voice cracked slightly. What if the real me doesn't fit in your world any better than the version of me that was trying to? Then maybe, Lucas said slowly, we need to build a different world, one that has room for both of us as we actually are. The idea hung in the air between them, fragile and profound. A different world. Not his world that she had to fit into, not her world that he had to escape to, but something entirely new. I'm scared, Emma whispered. Me too. Lucas pulled her close, and Emma let herself sink into his embrace. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped around each other in the afternoon light. Outside, the city moved on, people rushing to meetings, living their complicated lives, building and breaking and rebuilding. Inside, two people who'd lost each other were learning how to be found again. That night, Emma stayed over. Not in the guest room like she had been, but in Lucas's bed, their bed once upon a time. They didn't make love. It felt too soon, too weighted with expectation. Instead, they just held each other, Lucas's arms around her, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Emma? Lucas's voice was soft in the darkness. Yeah? I had a nightmare last night, first one since the accident. Emma tensed slightly. What was it about? Losing you. Not because of the accident, but because I wasn't brave enough to keep you, because I let fear and expectation and my mother's approval matter more than what we had. He paused. When I woke up, I couldn't remember if it was a dream or a memory. Emma tilted her head up, finding his eyes in the dim light from the window. Does it matter? I think it does, because if it was a memory, then I've already made that mistake once, and I don't want to make it again. Then don't, Emma said simply. Choose differently this time. Lucas kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender it made Emma's eyes burn. I'm trying. I know. She settled back against his chest. We both are. As Emma drifted towards sleep, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. The accident that had stolen Lucas's memory, but given them both a strange second chance. The months of grief and uncertainty. The careful rebuilding of something that might be entirely new, or might be the same thing they'd had before, just stronger. She didn't know what the future held, didn't know if Lucas's memories would ever return, or if they'd spend the rest of their lives with 6 years of his life existing only in her recollection. Didn't know if they could make it work this time, or if they'd discover the same problems that had been there before. But lying there in the darkness, Lucas's heartbeat steady beneath her ear, Emma felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Some loves are worth fighting for twice. 6 months later. Emma stood in the doorway of the apartment, their apartment, no hesitation in the claim anymore, watching Lucas at the window. The same window where she'd first seen him after his release from the hospital, when he'd been a stranger, wearing a familiar face. He wasn't a stranger anymore. The morning light caught the paint on his fingers, remnants of an early session in the spare room they'd converted into his studio. He'd been working on a series, he'd told her, abstract pieces exploring memory and loss, and the strange beauty of rebuilding. One gallery had already expressed interest in showing them. "You're staring?" Lucas said without turning around, a smile in his voice. "I'm appreciating," Emma corrected, moving to stand beside him. "There's a difference." He turned to her, and the look in his eyes, warm, present, entirely hers, still made her breath catch sometimes. Not because it reminded her of before, but because it was wholly now. "I have something to tell you," Lucas said, his expression shifting to something more serious. Emma's heart stuttered. "Should I be worried?" "No." He took her hand. "I've been having flashes. Not memories exactly, but feelings. When you hummed while making coffee, I felt peace. Like I'd heard that sound 1,000 times and it always meant home." Emma went still. They'd stopped hoping for his memory to return, had built something that didn't need the past, but the possibility had always hovered. "My therapist says it doesn't matter if they're real memories or new connections," Lucas continued. "That love is love regardless of when it started." "Do you believe that?" Emma whispered. "I do." Lucas cupped her face. "Because whether I loved you 6 years ago or 6 months ago doesn't change that I love you now, completely." The words hung between them, simple and profound. Emma had spent so long wanting him to remember their love, to reclaim what they'd had, but standing here now she realized she didn't need him to remember. She just needed him to choose her every day, with full awareness of what that choice meant. "I love you too," she said. "The you that exists right now. The one who paints and asks hard questions and isn't afraid to build something new." Lucas smiled, and it was everything. Warmth and promise and the kind of happiness that doesn't need perfection to be real. "I actually have something else to tell you. Or show you, rather." He pulled away, moving to the bookshelf and retrieving a small velvet box. Emma's heart stopped entirely. "Before you panic," Lucas said quickly, seeing her expression, "this isn't what you think. Or maybe it is, but not in the way you're thinking." He opened the box, revealing not a ring, but a key. "I've been thinking about what you said, about building a different world, one that has room for both of us." Emma stared at the key, confused. "I don't understand." "I bought a building," Lucas said, "in Brooklyn, near that bookstore you love. It needs work, but the ground floor could be a gallery space for my paintings, and the second floor could be offices for your consulting business. The one you're going to start once you finish your degree." Emma's throat tightened. "Lucas, I never said—" "I know, but I've seen you studying. I've heard you talking about small business development with the passion you used to reserve for books and quiet Saturday mornings. And I thought, why should you work for someone else when you could build something of your own? Something that doesn't require you to fit into anyone else's world." "That's insane," Emma said, but she was smiling through tears. "We can't just buy a building." "Why not? I have money sitting in accounts doing nothing. At least this way it builds something that matters, something that's ours, not mine or yours, but genuinely ours." Emma looked at the key, then at Lucas, then back at the key. It was impulsive and impractical, and exactly the kind of grand gesture she'd told herself she didn't need. But looking at Lucas's face, hopeful and uncertain and so completely present, she realized it wasn't about the building at all. It was about creating space for both of them to grow, to become, to exist without apology or compromise. "Okay," Emma said softly. "Okay, okay." She took the key, its weight solid and real in her palm. "Let's build something new." Lucas pulled her close, and they stood there in the morning light, holding each other in the apartment that had witnessed their ending and their beginning. Outside, the city hummed with possibility. Inside, two people who'd learned that love doesn't require memory, it only requires presence, honesty, and the courage to keep choosing each other. 1 year later. The gallery opening was small, but perfect. Lucas's paintings lined the walls, bold strokes of color and emotion that made people stop, really look, feel something they couldn't quite name. Emma moved through the space, watching strangers connect with his work, seeing them recognize their own stories of loss and rebuilding in his abstract forms. Upstairs, through the ceiling, she could hear muted footsteps. Her office, her business. Small business solutions, helping entrepreneurs from backgrounds like hers navigate the complex world of growth and development. She had 3 clients already, and more inquiries coming in. "You did it," Victoria Ashford's voice said behind her. Emma turned, surprised. Lucas's mother had been invited but hadn't confirmed she'd attend. Yet here she was, elegant and composed as always, studying one of Lucas's larger pieces. "We did it," Emma corrected gently. "Both of us." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "I was wrong about you," she said finally, still not looking at Emma. "I thought you were temporary, a phase my son would grow out of. But you're not temporary, are you?" "No," Emma said simply. "I'm not. He's different now, happier, more himself than I've seen him in years." Victoria finally turned to face her. "I won't pretend I understand it. I won't pretend this is what I would have chosen for him. But it's what he's chosen. And it's clear that choice was right. It wasn't an apology, it wasn't quite acceptance, but it was acknowledgement, and that was enough." "Thank you," Emma said. Victoria nodded once, then moved away to examine another painting. Emma watched her go, feeling something release in her chest. She didn't need Victoria's approval anymore, but it was nice to have her respect. Lucas found her a few minutes later, sliding his arm around her waist. "You okay?" "More than okay." Emma leaned into him. "Your mother was here." "I saw. How was it?" "Civil, almost warm. Progress." Emma smiled up at him. "We're making progress." "We are," Lucas agreed. He gestured to the crowded gallery. "All of this, it's more than I imagined." "It's exactly what we built," Emma said. "Together." They stood like that, surrounded by art and possibility, by the life they'd created from the ruins of what they'd lost. Emma thought about that first day in the hospital when Lucas had looked at her with empty eyes. She thought about all the months of grief and uncertainty, of learning and relearning, of choosing and being chosen. She wouldn't change any of it. Not the accident, not the amnesia, not the painful rebuilding, because it had brought them here, to this moment, this life, this version of love that was earned rather than assumed, chosen rather than remembered. "Hey," Lucas said softly, pulling her attention back to him. "Where'd you go?" "Nowhere," Emma said, and it was true. She wasn't living in the past anymore, wasn't mourning what they'd lost. She was here, fully present, fully alive. "I'm right here." "Good." Lucas kissed her forehead, that tender gesture that had become theirs. "Because this is exactly where you belong." Outside, the Brooklyn evening settled over their building, their gallery, their new world. And inside, two people who'd learned that love isn't about perfect memory or seamless history stood together, grateful for the messy, imperfect, absolutely real second chance they'd been given. If this story touched your heart, like, comment, and subscribe for more romances that remind us love can change everything, sometimes by making us start over completely.